All right, so let's get started. I just want to start by recapping a little bit of last week. We just kind of jumped into Nehemiah's story, and then we got into purpose, vision, and mission, and we talked about the differences between purpose, vision, and mission. Purpose is why we're created. Our vision is the picture that we see, and then our mission is how we're going to accomplish it. So what I want to do tonight is kind of just jump straight into the next portion. We're gonna go a little bit over what we did last week as far as Nehemiah's story and kind of piecing things together, but I just want to jump straight into Nehemiah chapter 1 verse 4, which we read last week, and just read that again real quick. It says, "When I heard these things, I sat down and wept. For some days I mourned and fasted and prayed before the God of heaven." And I titled this first part Desperate Faith because I think we've all been desperate before. We've all been in that place where we're desperate for a new job. Maybe you're single and you're desperate for a spouse, desperate for growth in a relationship, maybe even desperate for a home. Whatever it is, we've all been at a point where we're desperate. Not so like so desperate, but at the same time we've experienced some level of desperation. And the more desperate we are, the more we're willing to do just about anything to find a solution to that problem, the thing that we're desperate for. We'll do whatever we can to kind of accomplish it. And that's what we see here in the first part of Nehemiah's story. Here he gets this situation. He hears what's going on with his people, and he is desperate for a move of God. So he immediately responds by fasting and praying and seeking the face of God and praying for God's favor. And then we see here in just a little bit, we'll see how he responds. He does something in spite of fear. He does what is necessary to accomplish what needs to be accomplished. And I think it's through that desperation when we just kind of start to dive in, and it gets us to the point where we're willing to cross the threshold. The threshold is a point of departure or transition. This is that point where we move basically into action. So we're desperate for something. We want something to happen. We know that something needs to happen. We hit this point where we're willing to move into action and do what's necessary. So I kind of wanted to throw in another story here from Esther. Esther's situation is what's about to happen to her people. Mordecai comes to her to kind of give her some advice and tell her what she needs to do, that she needs to go to the king because basically there's an edict that has just gone out that they're going to just annihilate all of the Jews. So Mordecai sends word to her because she is the king's wife, but she knows that she's not allowed to go to the king just to talk to him. But Mordecai tells her to do that. And so she sends word back, and this is how Mordecai responds. He says, in Esther chapter 4, verse 13 through 16, it says, "Do not think that because you are in the king's house, you alone of all the Jews will escape. For if you remain silent at this time, relief and deliverance for the Jews will arise from another place, but you and your family will perish. And who knows but that you have come to your royal position for such a time as this." Then Esther sent this reply to Mordecai: "Go gather together all the Jews who are in Susa and fast for me. Do not eat or drink for 3 days, night or day. And I and my attendants will fast as you do. And when this is done, I will go to the king, even though it is against the law. And if I perish, then I perish." Esther has reached a point of desperation, but I love what it says here, that you have been put in this position, in this royal position, for such a time as this. And I think that when we finally reach that point that something has to give, that we know that it's just at a point that, or we reach that point of purpose where we recognize that God has placed us here for such a time as this, that's where we're willing to now move and do whatever it takes, that position of desperate faith. And I think about when Abram and I felt called to plant this church here in Cocoa Beach. It was it took a long time, very much like Nehemiah took the time to pray and fast. We took several years to pray and fast about what we felt like God laid on our hearts. But there came a time where we had to make a huge leap of faith. So we hit this point where we just realized that God said, you have to set a date whether you have what you need or not. And so we did. And this is the interesting thing that is, I think, a little bit different about biblical leadership versus non-biblical leadership. Biblical leadership kind of goes beyond the logical thinking, and sounds like really awful advice, that there are times you take steps of faith where even in a secular business, you would even make leaps of faith because you're taking maybe making a gamble or whatever. The thing about this is when we truly believe that it is God who has called us to such a time as this, it's not a gamble, but it is a leap of faith, not necessarily knowing how God is going to come through, but knowing that he will, because he's the one who's placed it in our hearts, which leads us to the next point, which is trust in God's provision. And I'm just going to read this part of Nehemiah's story here in chapter 2, verses 4 through 8. It says, "The king said to me, 'What is it that you want?' Then I prayed to the God of heaven, and I answered the king, 'If it pleases the king, and if your servant has found favor in his sight, let him send me to the city in Judah where my ancestors are buried so that I can rebuild it.' Then the king with the queen sitting beside him asked me, 'How long will your journey take, and when will you get back?' It pleased the king to send me, so I set a time. I also said to him, 'If it pleases the king, may I have letters to the governors of Trans-Euphrates so that they will provide me safe conduct until I arrive in Judah. And may I have a letter to Asaph, keeper of the royal park, so he can give me timber to make beams for the gates of the citadel by the temple and for the city wall and for the residence that I will occupy.' And because the gracious hand of God was on me, the king granted my request." So here he is taking that leap of faith, because in what Nehemiah did here is he had spent the time praying. 3 to 4 months had passed. And in the meantime, he hasn't said anything or acted any specific way in front of the king. And he finally hits this point where he's trusting God to provide and trusting God to move. He does something that you're not supposed to or allowed to act sad in the sight of the king, being the cupbearer. So he decides to act sad in this moment. He's played his cards. He's thought this through. He finally takes this moment and just trusts that God will come through. And you see that God gave him favor in the sight of the king, and it says it pleased the king, and he granted his request. So he took this leap of faith, and he allowed God to provide. Manly Beasley said this: "If you are going to move out in faith and move with God and come to a position of biblical faith, you must establish in your heart that a need is the evidence that God has the supply." I love that. That the need is evidence that God has the supply. So if I see a need, that means God has the supply. He's put this in my heart to meet that need. And as long as I see a need, God has the supply to meet the need. And so I think we should move forward. So I decided to do things a little different because I just enjoy the 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 discussions that we get around, and I think that's where we tend to work things out ourselves. So we're going to come back in just a minute, but we're going to I have some questions on your papers. I have 3 questions. I'm not asking you to answer all 3 questions at your table, but I am asking you if you'll take these 3 questions, pick one of them. Not each one of you pick one of these 3 to discuss at the table. So if you want to talk about an area that God is calling you for desperate faith, and you talk about that. If you want to talk about with the threshold in your life that God is asking you to cross, or maybe it's just how do you think that God Nehemiah was able to answer the king's specific questions? Those 3 questions. Pick one of them for you specifically to talk about at your table. I'm going to give you about 5 minutes or so, and y'all just talk about that for a minute, and kind of get that out right there at your table. And then we'll move on into the next portion. All right. So the next thing we see in Nehemiah's story is is a discipline. So the first thing he does is go to prayer. It seems like we're just still stuck on verse 4, chapter 1, verse 4. But if you look at the next part, you if you think about the entire situation, that first of all, he immediately goes to fasting and prayer, and then and then he goes straight from there. It is 3 months of seeking God and praying to Him to kind of get advice. Then he goes to the king, and the way he deals with the king, clearly he knows what he's doing. But then when the king asks these questions, boy's got some answers. So he's already thought, he's done some research, he's done some planning, and clearly he's a very disciplined person. And so what I've done here is just a quick little thing that I got from John Maxwell, and it is how to develop discipline. I think this is probably an area that a lot of us struggle with. Maybe you're disciplined in some areas, but not all areas. But when it comes to leadership, we've got to learn how to be disciplined. And the first thing we have to do is set deadlines and priorities, um, because there's a lot of things that need to be done. And so we've learned this here at the Point Church, is that we have to set the priorities in line, because if not, you got 100 things that need to be done. And with 100 things that need to be done, what you end up doing is a little bit of everything, but not finishing anything if you don't set priorities. There are some things that can be put on the back burner. If you prioritize things, then you can determine what can wait and what needs to be done now. So go ahead and set those deadlines and put the priorities in place so that you're getting the things done that need to get done, and the things that you can always come back to, you put them in a list that says, this is the stuff we can come back to, this is the stuff we put off. And you come back to it. At some point, you may have to set a deadline on that. But right now, if you prioritize things, it helps you work through. Then challenge your excuses. We all can make excuses for everything that we do. I don't have enough time. I have too much going on. Challenge those excuses. Always try to do everything you can to eliminate the excuses. We here at the Point, we've the way we structure our Sunday mornings, we believe that there are a lot of people um, who may be coming for the first time that have a bad idea of church, or they've been hurt, burned by the church or something like that, I believe they're coming looking for excuses to not come back. So we do everything we can to eliminate those excuses. So I would encourage you with leadership, not just with yourself, but also with those under you, do everything you can to eliminate and challenge those excuses. Then number 3 is remove the rewards until the job is done. So I think I like to reward people. I say that I do. I like to reward people or let people know, because I want to give honor where honor is due. And when you accomplish something, I want you to know that I appreciate and job well done. But eliminate those rewards until the job is done. So what we can do sometimes, I'm kind of like the compliment sandwich guy, right? You did this well, but right, and then I give you the but I'm proud of you for doing this. So I kind of throw in the negative in the middle, and if you're not careful, before the job is done, you start giving those verbal rewards, thinking that's going to push them along. But if you're not careful, then you could actually be giving the idea that things are going well. So don't reward until the job is done. Make sure, hey, we're going on where we need to go. And then number 4 is stay focused on results. Stay focused on the main thing, the thing that you're after with your position, with your job. Stay focused on those things. There are plenty of things, just like the priorities. There are different things that could easily come up. That could be things that seem fun. One of the things we try to do, we try to be intentional about the decisions that we make, that they're the events that we do, things like that, they line up with our vision. I've seen a lot of churches that they seem to like to do things, and what happens is we have a lot of things going on, and so there's something going on every night of the week, but how many of those things? So I'm more of a quality over quantity kind of guy. So let's do our best to focus on the things that are really going to get the results, not just do things for the sake of doing things. So then the next thing we see in his story, I want to read this part, is we've got to learn to count the cost. Nehemiah chapter 2, verses 11 through 16, after he gets favor and the king grants his request, it says, I went to Jerusalem, and after staying there 3 days, I set out during the night with a few others. I had not told anyone what my God had put in my heart to do for Jerusalem. There were no mounts with me except the one that I was riding on. By night I went out through the valley gate toward the jackal well and the dung gate, examining the walls of Jerusalem, which had been broken down, and its gates, which had been destroyed by fire. Then I moved on toward the fountain gate and the king's pool, but there was not enough room for my mount to get through. So I went up the valley by night, examining the wall. Finally, I turned back and re-entered through the valley gate. The officials did not know where I had gone or what I was doing, because as yet I had said nothing to the Jews or the priests or noble or officials or any others who would be doing the work. So I kind of like, well, there's a few things here that I'd like to point out. The first thing is he doesn't say anything to anyone yet about what he is doing. I said this to one of the tables last week, and we're going to get to it at some point in this series. You're always going to be faced with opposition. Don't share what you're doing until you're ready to share it, because as soon as you share it, you're going to face opposition. People are going to be against it. People are going to tell you you can't do it. So be ready for that. So I would encourage you to do what Nehemiah did. He went and counted the cost. What he was doing is he was examining the project to see what needed to be done. So I would encourage you, do your research, know the demographics. Who are you reaching, and how are you going to reach them? So we did all the demographics. We um, it was, man, how many? Do you remember how many homeless students there were in Brevard County, babe, when we did that research? 1,800 homeless kids. Um, we know that there's 11,000 people in Cocoa Beach, little over 11,000. There's little over 9,000 in Cape Canaveral. There's 30 to 40,000 in Merritt Island. I remember doing all that research because we were trying to see what are we looking at? What are the what's the average age? And so when it comes to your business, what's the demographic? Who are you trying to go after? What are the people that, like, maybe yours is going to be young families, all right? Because if you know your product, if it's a specific product that you're selling, you know your product and you know who it appeals to. So you need to know that who it really appeals to and how to reach those people that it appeals to the most. So if you're going to market to some 20-something-year-olds, you're going to market a whole lot different than you are to 60-something-year-olds, because the you're going to market on TikTok and Facebook and Instagram for young people, where there's 60-something-year-olds who have no idea what any of those things are. So there's a difference. Know your demographics. Know the people that you're trying to reach. So do your research. Count the cost. Know what it's going to cost you. We went through and did all the research to find out how much it would cost to rent a facility, how much it was going to cost for sound equipment, lighting equipment. We called different companies to get a quote of what it was going to look like. When we first thought we were going to go to the elementary school, then we got the size of the elementary school. It was going to be the cafeteria. What kind of chairs are we going to use? All that stuff, because there's just so many details of what you need to do that. Make sure you go through those details. Make sure you get all that stuff. Once you count the cost, you can start developing a plan. And some of that is going to come out as you develop the plan. But this is the part where, for me, it starts to get a little bit more fun. So I'm going to do some stuff in a few minutes after we answer some more questions. But develop a plan. So where are you going, and how are you getting there? Why should I care about this specific product? What does success look like? And how do I solve the problem? Or which the problem is, okay, you don't have any customers yet. So the problem is, how do I solve that problem? How do I get out there? How do people know who I am? A part of developing a plan may be a marketing strategy. So there's so many different things. So I put together these three things: objective, potential solution, and strategy. Objective is increase. So this is just an example. What is your objective? To increase product revenue? Well, our objective here, just to kind of give you a little bit of a difference, so your business may be different than ours, which should be. Ours is to reach those far from God and make disciples. That's basically, as any church is going to be. Reach those far from God and make disciples. So what's the potential solution? Sell more of the same product or sell new product? Maybe it's both. Ours is get people to church, get the message of Christ out in the community. Those are two ways that we can, these are two potential solutions to the objective, to reach those who are far from God. And then what are some strategies? So for a normal business, maybe how do I attract new customers, and how do I sell more to existing customers? For us, it would be, so we want to make disciples, small groups. This group that we have here tonight are the outreach that we do. Even marketing is something we would do to get new people in, to get people to know that we exist. And when it comes to marketing is one of those things. You'll get in trouble if you think that if you do one marketing plan that you're going to get immediate results. If you do a 10,000 person mailer. I just understand this. We chose not to do this when we started because I did all the research to find that specifically new churches don't get a good response from that, but existing churches that have been around for 5 to 10 years do get a response because people have heard of your church before. So when it comes to marketing, people are supposed to see your product or your logo or something that relates to your company at least 3 times before they'll even pay it any attention. So if you put it, if I get a mailer for a church or for anything, to actually, you know what I do with it? I throw it in the trash. All right. However, my brain did see it, and so that's what you have to understand when it comes to marketing. Marketing is one of those things. You see it, all right, and so if you're going to do it, understand the cost that I just put into this. No one is coming to my business because of this 10,000 person mailer or 10,000 home mailer. However, it does get them to see my logo for the first time. So then what's the next marketing strategy? So the strategy needs to be, how am I going to keep doing this? So the next thing they see, all right, now their brain goes, I think I may have seen that before. But they still, chances are, if it's a handout or if it's something they saw or a sign somewhere, they're not paying it much mind. The third time they see it, it starts to click. Okay, what is that? I keep seeing that. Then they may actually read it. So those are, I don't know why I decided to just tell you about marketing strategy right there real quick. But I did. So what I want you to do for the next few minutes, as soon as we're done with these questions, I've got some strategies that I'm going to draw on the whiteboard to maybe help you when it comes to planning for yourself. But answer one of these 3 questions. What are the 4 most important aspects of your ministry or your position? We'll get to that in a minute. What is your target crowd? And how would you define success? One of those 3 questions. Choose that and discuss that with your team. All right? Or your table. Might want to move on. So I put together a few things. These are some things that I learned throughout the years. Um, all these different leadership courses that I've taken, and not just that, but just going through learning from other pastors and other ministries on how they do it. And I just think this is really good. No matter whether you're in ministry or or wherever you're at as far as leadership goes. So here's kind of like a just an outline of a structure where you have your leadership. This is where this is the strategic planning. This is the top. This is where the vision comes from and the mission. Then you have self-management. Self-management is the discipleship. This is where it's not just you personally, but it is within uh, your your position, within your company, within your ministry. How are you managing them? How are you growing them? How are you growing yourself? Then you have relationship. This is not just relationship within your organization, but without. What is your relationship with the community? What is your relationship with your customers? How are you building and focusing on relationships, building those relationships? Then you have the analytical. This is the part where you need some problem solving strategies and solutions. And as you work through this system, you have to understand and know who has the competencies for each area. When I say that, I'm not saying certain people aren't competent, but there are certain people that are more competent in certain areas. They have the skill set to function in these areas. Some people are going to be much better at building relationship with the community, than they are going to be here. You may never want that person here, but they're great when it comes to building relationships with the community and building relationships with the customers. So know those things. You may have somebody within the organization that is a great problem solver that belongs nowhere else. You do every now and then, you have the jack of all trades. Usually the jack of all trades is a master of none. So understand that. Typically, the master you don't want anywhere else, because that's where they're gifted, and they're very specifically gifted. And then you've got the management aspect. This is where you're managing to make things happen. So execution. This is where it's making sure we execute the plans that we've made throughout here. Who's managing to make sure these things are getting done? Okay. So now the next thing I want to kind of show you is the 4 C's. The 4 C's is, see if I can get this right. The ultimate goal is to take people from the outside and move them in. So I'm going to start here. The outside is the community, okay? And April and Miss Sarah have already seen this one before. Community, then you have your crowd. Then you have your committed. I probably just spelled that wrong. I did too. It's not. And core. Okay. So in the ministry, the core is leadership. This is not just paid staff, but it's also leaders who are they're way beyond just your committed people, but these are the people who are growing and people that you can rely on to lead other people. They're your core. These people are not going anywhere. They love you, they believe in your vision, and they want to be a part, and they want to take the vision further. And they want to take, but the ultimate goal is to have a solution out here, which is your community. So your community is people outside of your organization that they may have heard of you, they may not have heard of you. The ultimate goal is to take the community and get them to become your crowd. Okay? The crowd is the people who show up from time to time. Every now and then you see them, but you don't always see them. And this is the way we see that in the church. These are the people that are maybe our what do you Easter and Christmas people, right? They only show up at certain times. They went from the community and they learned about us, they heard about us, and so they've become the crowd. Well, the ultimate goal is to have a solution where the people from the crowd become a part of the committed. And the committed are those that come every single week, who may even serve, that are part of serving, a part of your volunteer team. For us, volunteer team, your committed are going to be your employees or those under you that that they believe and they're a part of it. But then you have your core. The ultimate goal is to take your committed to the core, and you just keep this process going. Once they become a part of the core, these are your leaders helping lead and take people to the next level. Your core is a part of every aspect here of keeping it moving. So then I'm going to move over here to the 3 Ds. This is going to be more. This is the part where you're focusing more on these 2. All right, you're focusing more on your actual employees or your volunteers, those, and that here, because what you're trying to do is you want leaders to help keep it moving. You have discover, develop, and deploy. Yeah. Okay. So, um, I feel like maybe I should go back and help me find an example real quick. If you're here and you're just trying to figure out how to be a leader of your family and you got kids, how could we look at this and say what's the ultimate goal here? What's in the center? Well, we want to raise children who are um, what would you call hmm? Happy. Okay, that would be a great one. We want children that are happy, but we also want them contributing members of society, right? We want them to contribute to society. Okay, but you yes, you don't want them living at home. But the ultimate goal is okay for us as believers. We want our children to grow up happy, um, contributing members of society. But more than that, we want them to love Christ and to serve Christ. So that's the ultimate goal. So we want to get them from well, we've already got them past community. They're not. We already know, but we want to move them past from that stage of just being a child and having fun. We want to disciple them. So we want to have a plan to move them into knowledge of Christ. Then they know Christ, and then so somewhere around here there's a decision for Christ. Once they make a decision for Christ, now we want to disciple them. We want them to grow to know Christ, so they don't just go to church on Sunday, but now they know more about Christ. So there's this process of, hey, the first thing is we want to get them saved. The next thing is we want them to grow and actually have a heart for other people, and then we want them to, hey, not now you're somebody who's self-disciplined and you're actually bearing fruit here. So, anyways, it's just an idea from not just a business side of things, but from a home standpoint. If you are trying to figure out how to be a leader in your home, and how do you do that in any kind of relationship. But then we move over here to the 3Ds: discover, develop, deploy. The goal here is to discover the leaders. Discover the people that are in your organization that clearly um, they're they're self-motivated. Not just self-motivated, but they are team builders. This is the person that I know that I can really invest some time in, and I'm not going to be wasting my time, and it's going to be worth the business's the business's money and worth my time to invest in them. So now I've discovered who my leaders are. Now I'm going to spend time developing them. I'm going to spend time teaching them the things that I've learned through the organization. I'm going to spend the time teaching them the things that I know are going to be helpful. I'm going to do some extra research myself so I can find some leadership podcasts to send their way, those types of things. And then you get to a point where you deploy them. Now you give them the opportunity to lead themselves. So you take them from you've discovered you got a leader here. Now I'm going to develop them. And now here's the point where we release them into to do the job, to be the leader that they can possibly be. Last thing I want to show you, I'm going to throw it around so we don't lose that. If y'all want to get pictures of that in a minute. So I asked a question a minute ago. Some of you may have answered, maybe you didn't. And it is, I asked you, what are the 4 most important aspects of your ministry or your position or your job? And the reason why is because I asked that is because I want to show you something I learned years ago called the fractal team method. And basically, the bottom line here is to know that you can only You can only invest in so many people at one time and do it effectively. Jesus chose 12 disciples. He did not choose 20 something. He did not choose 30 something. He didn't even choose 13. He chose 12 to invest his time in and to lead them and train them and bring them into understanding and to develop them before he ended up deploying them. And if Jesus only dealt with 12, I can imagine then none of us should be trying to lead more than 12. So my job is to develop and deploy our leaders, to train and equip them. That's what I see. So what I've done, the fractal team method tries to keep you at 5 total. You being one of them, and then you have the 4 most important aspects of your job or your position. We look at the 4 most important aspects of our ministry. So the goal is to have I train and equip 4 people to do the job under me. So I'm going to just draw this out, how this looks for the Point Church, and then kind of give you some, maybe you can look at it and figure out how this works for you. But this is the part that's kind of fun for me, drawing this stuff out. So you got, you got me and April at the top as the lead pastors. Then we have the 4 most important aspects of the ministry. And they are something. Ministries, worship, culture, and outreach. Now, we recently reevaluated this and changed this up because of we did this when we first started, and it got muddy, and we realized it just wasn't working the way we wanted it to work. So we reevaluated it and kind of made some changes. So, but anyway, so the most important aspects are okay. What ministries do we have under the Point Church? Our worship experience on Sundays, outside of Sundays as well. The culture that we create here, and then outreach. How are we reaching out to the community and others, and even not just in our community but across the world? So that's where our world missions falls under. So then, their job is to have, train, and equip 4 people under them. Now, do you think we have all 4 of these positions filled? No, but we have a plan, okay? But this is the goal. So there's a strategy here for us to move forward in a direction. So, what do we have under here? We have right now we only have 3 under here. This is youth ministry. So I'm just gonna go YM. That's awful. Children's ministry and small groups. Worship, we have our worship experience. We have production. We have, what else do we have? Well, creative aspect. So this would be things that we don't do. Well, it's not completely true, but there are some things that I see in creative that I'd like us to do human videos during church and all that kind of stuff. Then we have our culture. Our culture under here, we have our starting point. We have our what do we have? First impressions. Hey, Miss April, do you remember some of these things? We have our beautification. We have a beautification team, but when we say beautification here, what? Yeah. We'll just stop at B. Beautification is how the place looks, that it fits who we are, and it fits the culture that we want to present. So how does this place look? And the beautification team would fall under beautification, and then the other was CE. Yes, thank you. Crew experience. All right. So then outreach, we have foreign ministries, or foreign missions, local missions, outreach events. All right. So the I my April and I's job is to train and equip each one of these. So it's helpful that we work together, because the way this kind of works for us is, even though we do our best to train and equip all of these, I'm more gifted in these two areas. These are the areas that work best for me. Culture, um, when it comes to beautification, how this place looks, that kind of stuff, that is not. Um, I'm not gifted there. I want it to look great, but April is gifted in that first impressions and creating that culture, and creating the atmosphere. She really focuses on, and she is gifted in hospitality. I'm not gifted in hospitality, so we've chosen to use our gifts to work in certain areas. Now we have structured a couple of things. We have an executive assistant, and we have an executive pastor here. So what we did, Pastor Chris is our executive pastor, and then our executive assistant. Ultimate goal is for executive pastor to be just executive pastor, but executive pastor actually has a +1 here. He runs this area, which is also, but also is a +1 over here in youth ministries. And then we have Miss April is a +1 in culture, which is, and then first impressions. And so the goal is eventually, so we have this plan of working downward. In first impressions, if they wanted to, they could, what's that? Starting point. What did I say? First impression. Yeah, first impressions here. First impressions can easily be split up into ushers, the greeters, parking team. And so before long, parking team can say, hey, we got 4 areas, because we got more than one parking lot, and then we also, so we need a runner for this. We need a setup team to set things out. So you can keep going down and spreading that out as you grow, as you see those things. The ultimate thing is that we try our best not to add up here, but that we add downward as we go. Now, if we notice something that needs to be added, of course we'll add it as we go up here. But we're trying to fit everything within these 4 most important aspects of our ministry. So this is what I would encourage you to consider. Hey, what are the most important aspects of my job? As if I'm going to lead, what are the most important things that I've got to do? Now, your job may be a little different, but if as you lead, what are those 4 most important things? So in your home, what are the 4 most important things of our home? What do we focus on, and how do we have a plan? It doesn't mean you have people for because in your home, you're not going to have you're not going to be able to hire 4 maids for each section. It's just not going to work. So you're going to have to figure out how to do this yourself. But it helps as you make a plan like this and strategizing your way out and down the list. But hopefully, from a organizational point of view, as leaders, maybe some entrepreneurs here that you're trying to start a business or whatever, you're able to see this, and hopefully this is even helpful in your home as you kind of make some plans and put that together. All right, and that is all I have for tonight. Hopefully these things are helpful to you guys.